The email arrived at 3 in the morning. I was awake because sleep had become optional after Linda passed. The laptop glowed in the kitchen, and I watched the notification appear with the subject line, "Trust distribution complete." I opened it. The attachment showed a transfer authorization bearing my signature, dated 2 weeks prior, directing the entirety of my parents' estate into an account I had never opened. I had not signed anything. The signature looked correct. The notary seal looked legitimate. But I had been in Seattle that day, burying my wife's ashes in the Sound where she wanted them scattered, and I had not touched a pen for anything except the condolence cards I could not finish writing. Someone had moved $4 million using my identity, and the only people with access to the trust documents were my brother and sister. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. My hands were steady. That steadiness had been a problem during Linda's illness because it made people think I was not feeling enough. But steadiness was simply how I processed. The grief was there. The rage would come. But first I needed to understand the shape of what had been done. I made coffee. The house was quiet in the way only empty houses are, with small settling sounds that used to be comforting and now just marked time. I was 43. My wife had been gone for 6 months. My business was intact but required nothing from me at the moment. I had space to think, and that was dangerous for whoever had done this. The last time I saw my brother Marcus was at Linda's funeral. He had worn an expensive suit and talked about his startup's latest funding round while people were still crying. My sister Diane stood beside him, nodding, her phone out, taking a call during the reception. They had not liked Linda. She was too direct. She had once told Marcus that his business model was extraction dressed as innovation, and he never forgave her for being right when his Series B collapsed. I had always been the steady one, the one who finished graduate school while working nights, the one who built a logistics company from a single route into something that ran itself, the one who stayed in Oregon when they moved to San Francisco to chase capital and networks. My parents respected that. They built the trust to be distributed evenly, but they made me the executor because I was the one who returned calls and remembered birthdays. The trust had been sitting untouched since Dad died 18 months ago. Mom had passed 3 years before that. The plan was to let it grow and distribute it when we all needed it or wanted to do something meaningful. I had not needed it. Marcus and Diane apparently had. I opened the laptop again and began working backward through my email. There was no correspondence about the trust, no requests for signatures, no calendar invites for notary appointments. I checked my sent folder. Nothing. I pulled the original trust documents from the filing cabinet in my office. The pages were thick and formal, drafted by the estate attorney my parents had used for 40 years. I read through the distribution protocols. Any transfer required either unanimous consent or executor authority with dual verification. There was no mechanism for a single withdrawal without my approval. The forged signature had bypassed that. Someone had built a paper trail that made it look like I had authorized everything. That required planning. That required access not just to documents, but to my schedule, my patterns, my handwriting. I thought about the last family gathering, Thanksgiving, 2 months before Linda's diagnosis. Marcus had borrowed my phone to make a call because his battery was dead. Diane had asked to use my home office to take a video meeting. I had thought nothing of it. We were family. I poured more coffee and watched the sky lighten through the kitchen window. The neighborhood was waking. A man walked his dog past my fence. The garbage truck made its rounds. Normal life continued while I sat with the shape of betrayal. The logical step was to call the estate attorney. But attorneys moved slowly and required evidence I did not yet have. I needed to understand the scope first. I needed to see what else had been altered or moved or stolen before I made any accusations. I opened a secure browser and logged into the Trust's financial portal using the credentials my father had given me years ago. The account showed a zero balance. The transaction history showed the transfer, dated and authorized with my forged signature on file. Below that were 3 smaller transfers from the previous month, each under $10,000, moving into the same destination account. They had been testing, making sure the forgery worked, making sure no alarms would trigger. I copied the account number for the destination. It was not a personal account. The routing number indicated a business entity. I ran it through the state business registry. The LLC was called Vanguard Momentum Holdings, registered 6 months ago in Delaware, with Marcus and Diane listed as managing partners. They had built a vehicle to receive the money, hidden it behind a corporate structure, and then manufactured my consent. This was not impulsive. This was designed. I sat back and let the anger arrive. It was cold and clarifying. They had not just stolen from me. They had stolen from what my parents built, from the future they had imagined for their children, and they had done it while I was scattering Linda's ashes. There was a cruelty in the timing that felt personal. Marcus knew where I was that day. I had told him. He had said something vague about honoring her memory, and then hung up quickly. I had thought he was uncomfortable with grief. Now I understood he was simply busy. I could sue, I could file police reports, I could freeze the accounts and trigger investigations. All of that would work eventually. Attorneys and judges would restore the money, probably, after years of depositions and procedural warfare. Marcus and Diane would claim it was a misunderstanding, a paperwork error, a tragic confusion during a difficult time. They would settle for a fraction and move on. That outcome felt insufficient. I wanted something that would make them understand not just that they had been caught, but that they had chosen the wrong target. I spent the day gathering information. I pulled credit reports. I accessed public records. I found the business filings for Marcus's current startup, a venture called Apex Collaborative that promised to revolutionize supply chain transparency using proprietary algorithms. The irony was not lost on me. He was selling the same services my company had been providing for a decade, but with more buzzwords and a prettier pitch deck. Diane was listed as Chief Strategy Officer. The company had raised $2 million in seed funding and was actively courting a Series A. Their investor deck was public, filed with the SEC as part of a Regulation D exemption. I read through it. They projected aggressive growth and claimed proprietary advantages they did not actually have. The business model depended on securing 3 anchor clients within 18 months. Without those clients, the funding would dry up and the company would collapse. They needed the stolen trust money to bridge the gap. That was why the timing. That was why the risk. I made a list of Apex's competitors. There were a dozen in the supply chain analytics space, but one stood out. A nonprofit called Open Logistics Initiative, run by a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who had left a tenured position at MIT to build open-source tools for small and mid-sized supply companies. Her foundation operated on grants and donations. She refused venture capital because she wanted to keep the tools free and accessible. Marcus hated her. He had written blog posts about how her approach was naive and unsustainable. He had called her a threat to innovation during a panel I had watched online. The venom was obvious. She was everything he was not, patient, principled, and uninterested in extraction. I looked at Open Logistics financials. They were transparent, posted quarterly on their website. The foundation ran on about $800,000 a year, mostly from small grants and individual contributions. They were effective, but constrained. With more resources, they could expand their tools, support more companies, and make Marcus's proprietary model obsolete. An idea began forming. It was not revenge, exactly. It was symmetry. I spent the next week building the case. I documented every transaction. I collected the forged signatures and compared them to my actual handwriting. I identified the discrepancies, the pressure points, the letter spacing, the angle of my initials. I compiled the timeline showing I was in Seattle when the notarization allegedly occurred. I pulled travel records, credit card receipts, and the funeral home contract. Then I called the estate attorney, a man named Harold Brennan, who had known my parents since before I was born. He was 70 now, mostly retired, but he still managed their legacy work. "I need to talk about the trust," I said. "Of course," Harold said. His voice was careful. "I heard about the distribution. I was surprised you moved so quickly." "I did not move anything." There was a pause. "Explain." I walked him through what I had found. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "This is forgery," he said finally, "and fraud. You need to file a police report immediately." "I will," I said, But I want to do something else first. What? I want to redirect the funds, legally, before any freezes or holds complicate things. Redirect where? To a non-profit foundation. I will make the case that the original distribution was invalid, and as executor, I am correcting it by fulfilling my parents' charitable intentions. Harold was silent. Then, that is extremely aggressive and risky. If you move the money before the court resolves the forgery, you could be accused of complicating the recovery. The money is still in trust, I said. Technically, the transfer was never valid because it was based on fraud. I'm just correcting the error before it becomes permanent. You are playing a dangerous game. I am executing my authority as trustee. If Marcus and Diane want to challenge it, they can explain to a judge why they forged my signature. Harold exhaled slowly. You would need ironclad documentation, and you would need to move fast. I have documentation. Let me review it. I sent him everything. He called back 3 hours later. This is airtight, he said. The forgery is obvious. The timeline is clear. You have standing to void the transfer and redirect under your discretionary authority as executor. But once you do this, there is no going back. Your siblings will fight you. Good, I said. He paused. I will draft the paperwork, but I am noting in my file that I advised caution. Noted. The documents took 2 days. Harold prepared a declaration of fraudulent transfer, a voiding order under my executor authority, and a new distribution directive. The directive moved the full trust balance to the Open Logistics Initiative, designated as a fulfillment of my parents' long-standing interest in supporting ethical business practices and community tools. I signed everything in Harold's office, with his notary seal and witness signatures on every page. Then I filed a police report. I walked into the precinct with my binder of evidence and sat across from a detective who looked too young to be skeptical, but was anyway. Family disputes are civil matters, he said after I explained. This is identity theft and forgery, I said. I showed him the signature comparisons. I showed him the timeline. I showed him the corporate structure. He looked through the documents slowly. This is pretty elaborate. Yes. You're sure you want to pursue this? Family cases get complicated. I am sure. He took my statement and opened a case file. He said it would take time. I said that was fine. That night I called Sarah Chen. I found her number through the foundation's website and reached her on the second try. Dr. Chen, I said, my name is Peter Calloway. I run a logistics company in Oregon, and I've been following your work. Thank you, she said. She sounded cautious. What can I do for you? I want to make a donation to Open Logistics Initiative, a significant one. How significant? $4 million. There was a long silence. Then, I'm sorry, what? $4 million. It is from a family trust. My parents believed in accessible tools and ethical business models. Your foundation aligns with that. Mr. Calloway, that is an extraordinary amount. We would need to discuss governance, restrictions, and deployment timelines. No restrictions, I said. Use it however you see fit. I trust your judgment. Another pause. Why? Because you are doing the right work, and because someone I know has been trying to undermine it. I would like to make sure that does not happen. Who? Marcus Calloway. My brother. I heard her breathe in. I see. This is not about him, I said. This is about making sure your work continues. But yes, it will also make his life more difficult. I'm comfortable with that. Mr. Calloway, I need to be very careful about the appearance of this donation. If it looks retaliatory or strategic, it could damage the foundation's reputation. It is not retaliatory. It is restorative. My family tried to steal this money. I'm putting it somewhere that honors what it was meant to do. You are aware that this will likely escalate tensions with your brother. I am counting on it. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I will need to consult with our board, but if everything is legitimate, we would be honored to accept. Everything is legitimate. My attorney will send the paperwork tomorrow. Thank you, she said. This will change what we can do. Good. I hung up and sat in the dark kitchen again. The house was still too quiet, but the silence felt different now. less empty, more like the pause before something starts. The next morning, Harold executed the transfer. The funds moved from Vanguard Momentum Holdings back into the trust account, then immediately out to Open Logistics Initiative. The entire sequence took 4 hours. By noon, the money was gone from Marcus and Diane's reach and locked into a foundation they could not touch. I did not call them. I waited. Marcus called me that evening. His voice was tight and high, the way it got when he was trying to control panic. "What did you do?" he said. "I corrected a fraudulent transfer," I said. "That money was distributed legally. You authorized it." "I did not. You forged my signature." "That is insane. You are confused. You have been under a lot of stress." "I have documentation. I have a police report. I have an attorney who will testify that the notarization was falsified. You took the money while I was scattering Linda's ashes. You thought I would not notice or would not care." His breathing changed. "You cannot prove any of that." "I already have. The transfer is voided. The money is gone." "Gone where?" "To a foundation that will do more good than you ever could." There was a long silence. Then, "You gave it to Sarah Chen." "I fulfilled my parents' wishes. They wanted the trust to support ethical work." "You son of a bitch! That was our money." "It was never yours. You stole it. Now it is somewhere you cannot reach. I will sue you. Diane and I will take you apart." "Go ahead. Explain to a judge why you forged estate documents. Explain why you built a shell company to receive stolen funds. Explain why you did it while your brother was burying his wife." He hung up. Diane called an hour later. Her voice was colder, more controlled. "We can work this out," she said. "No. Peter, please, this does not have to be ugly. We made a mistake. We thought you had approved the transfer. There was a miscommunication. There was a forgery. We can split the money. You can take half. We will donate the rest wherever you want. Just reverse the transfer. It is already distributed. You cannot get it back. Then we will sue the foundation." "On what grounds? That they accepted a legitimate donation?" "We will say you were not in your right mind. Grief. Diminished capacity. Try it. I have been running a multi-million-dollar business without missing a step. I have lawyers, accountants, and a flawless record. You have a forgery and a shell company." She was quiet. Then, "You're destroying us. You destroyed yourselves. I'm just making sure you understand what you did." She hung up without another word. The next 2 weeks brought what I expected. Marcus and Diane hired an attorney, a sharp young man from a San Francisco firm that specialized in high-stakes disputes. He filed an emergency motion to freeze the trust and reverse the distribution. Harold filed a counter-motion with all the evidence of forgery. The judge reviewed both and scheduled a hearing. I attended. Marcus and Diane sat across the courtroom with their attorney. They did not look at me. The hearing was short. Harold presented the timeline, the signature analysis, and the fraudulent transfer documentation. Marcus's attorney argued that the distribution to Open Logistics was punitive and not in line with the trust's original intent. The judge read through everything, asked 3 questions, and then ruled. "The forgery is clear," she said. "The transfer to Vanguard Momentum Holdings is void. The executor acted within his authority to redirect the funds. The motion to freeze is denied." Marcus stood up. "Your Honor, this is not fair." The judge looked at him. "Mr. Calloway, you are fortunate that your brother chose a civil remedy. If he had pressed criminal charges first, you would be facing fraud indictments." "Sit down." He sat. The judge closed the file. "This matter is concluded. If you wish to pursue further claims, you may do so through standard channels. But the trust distribution stands." We left the courtroom separately. I did not wait to see their faces. The foundation announced the donation 2 weeks later. Sarah Chen wrote a public letter thanking the Calloway Family Trust for its generosity and outlining how the funds would be used, expanding the open-source tools, hiring regional coordinators, and launching a fellowship program for small business owners. She did not mention Marcus or Apex. She did not need to. The tech press picked up the story. Several outlets noted that the donation came from the family of Marcus Calloway, founder of Apex Collaborative, a direct competitor to Open Logistics. The optics were terrible for Marcus. Investors began asking questions. Why would his own family fund his competition? What did that say about his business model? Apex's Series A stalled. 2 anchor clients pulled out. Marcus posted a long thread on social media trying to explain the situation, but it read as defensive and bitter. Diane went quiet. I did not follow up. I did not gloat. I returned to my routines. I ran my business. I walked the same streets Linda and I used to walk. I kept the house exactly as it was because changing it felt like erasing her. One evening, 3 months after the hearing, I received an email from Sarah Chen. She said the foundation had deployed the first wave of tools, and the response had been overwhelming. Small companies across the country were using the platform. She thanked me again and invited me to visit the foundation's office if I was ever in Boston. I wrote back and said I would consider it. I did not know if Marcus and Diane would ever speak to me again. I did not know if they understood what they had done or if they simply resented being caught. I suspected the latter. People who steal from family rarely see themselves as thieves. They see themselves as entitled to what was always meant to be theirs. But I had learned something about betrayal during those months. It was not the act itself that mattered. It was the choice you made after. You could let it consume you, or you could turn it into something that clarified who you were and what you valued. I chose clarity. I chose to honor my parents by putting their money somewhere it would do what they believed in, building systems that helped people without extracting from them. I chose to protect myself by ensuring that Marcus and Diane could never again use family connection as a cover for theft. And I chose to move forward without bitterness, because bitterness was just another way of letting them control my life. The house was still too quiet. I still missed Linda in ways that made ordinary tasks feel impossible. But I had learned to sit with silence and let it be what it was. Space to think, space to grieve, space to decide what kind of man I wanted to be when everything else was stripped away. I wanted to be the kind of man my parents raised, the kind who kept his word, protected what mattered, and did not mistake patience for weakness. The trust was gone, but its purpose remained. My siblings had tried to steal that purpose and failed. The money was doing exactly what it should have, building something larger than any one person's ambition. I sat in my kitchen that night with the laptop closed and the lights off. The neighborhood was quiet. The dog walker passed my fence. The garbage truck would come in the morning. I had what I needed: clarity, boundaries, and the knowledge that I had done what was right even when it was hard. That was enough.